Now let's bring in tennis journalist Rebecca Adams for reaction to that family showdown. So Rebecca, Shanghai has a new champion, but Vijay, of course, had to beat his own cousin to get there. Did that make this rivalry that bit more exciting?
Yeah, absolutely. It just gave it this unique emotional dimension, didn't it? Added to the fact that you mentioned earlier, he's the world number 204. He came through qualifying to make it all the way to the final, knocked out several top 5 players en route to doing so, and then faced his cousin. And we saw that really emotional interview, didn't we? The post-match interview. And he even said that it wasn't a dream come true because nobody could actually have dreamt what happened. And the familiarity between these two players produced some really great tennis. And there was just this fascinating mix of respect and rivalry between them. It wasn't just a title match. It really felt like we were watching a family story unfold. And we haven't actually seen that since the Williams sisters were at the top. So it was absolutely fascinating to watch that final, and certainly not the one anyone would have expected.
Well, as you say, it felt like a family story unraveling, but he went from 204 to now world number 40. Is this just the start now going forward?
It really feels like it could be, because as I mentioned just a minute ago, beating top 5 opponents, making it all the way through to a final at Masters level, that's no fluke. Added to that, he'd come all the way from qualifying to do so, and he's clearly not fazed about who he's facing across the net. He actually came from a set down to beat his cousin in the final, and he beat Novak Djokovic in the semis as well. So he's shown that he can really play with huge belief. And Novak Djokovic had a timeout during their semi-final, a medical timeout. And we've seen him do that multiple times in matches, and sometimes it does throw off an opponent, but he was completely unfazed by it. But what he really needs to do now is back that up with real consistency. He needs to rise to the expectation. All eyes will now be on him because he was a relative unknown before this, and he needs to show that he can back that up as well and adjust to the grind of life on the tour now.
Well, as you mentioned, this really wasn't a final we were expecting. You talked about Novak Djokovic collapsing in the semis. Does this just reflect that potentially it could be the beginning of the end, or could this really just be the adverse weather conditions?
I mean, conditions in Shanghai are brutal. The humidity is high, the heat is high. Djokovic had been struggling all week, but it is a reminder of the stage he's at in his career. He's now 38, but he does take impeccable care of himself. However, he has spoken openly that he's finding it more and more difficult to go 5 sets with some of these younger players. These guys are now about 15 years younger than he is, and he said that it's really taking a toll on him having to play these long matches against players who can push him really far in tournaments. But saying that, he's a Grand Slam champion 24 times over. Knowing his mindset, he's not going to want to stop until he's reached 25. That number is significant to him. It's part of his legacy drive. It's not necessarily the end for Novak Djokovic, but it is a very clear reminder that he is at a late stage in his career where careful scheduling, physical management are going to be absolutely essential if he is going to continue to compete at the top and compete against players who are a decade and a half younger than he is.
Well, it was also a bit of a frustrating end at Shanghai for Daniil Medvedev. He, of course, has improved a lot since that first round exit from the US Open, but he's still far from his best, isn't he? What's going wrong?
Daniil Medvedev is an interesting character. He's a former Grand Slam champion. He's a former world number 1, but he hasn't won a title since 2023. He recently split with his long-term coach. They had a hugely successful partnership, but clearly he felt like something wasn't working. And splitting with a coach, regardless as to whether things are working or not, is massively unsettling. He also had a very, very public meltdown at the US Open, screaming at the umpire, smashing a racket. And he can be a real hothead, so he needs to manage his temperament more consistently. Medvedev was once seen as one of the main challengers, the new generation, the players who were going to challenge the likes of Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer, and Novak Djokovic. He was set to take the mantle once they retired, but he's since been caught between generations because we've got the likes of Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz who are now catching up with him. So it's difficult for Medvedev. If he can get his mindset sorted out, if he can start playing with a bit more confidence, perhaps there is a way back. He's certainly got the talent. But added to that, he started to try and change tactics as well. He's never been an aggressive player, but that's an aspect of his game that he's trying to work on, but it hasn't necessarily clicked just yet.
Well, as you say, all eyes will certainly be on the next generation. But Rebecca, thank you for joining us always.